So this is a quick tutorial on how to deploy your Flask app to Heroku through the command line interface. Bit of a mouthful. I'm going to basically show you how to launch your app onto Heroku website so that it's not just running on your local server, but so you can actually see your website running. And this is a Python-based app that I've shown you how to develop in these set of tutorials, which I will link to the list below. And if you follow those, you'll have the same app as me. But of course, if you've got your own Flask app and you want to deploy it in your own way, then you just need to follow this tutorial. This will also probably work for other types of apps as well, but it's specific for Flask. And obviously, ChatGPT is a great teacher. If this tutorial isn't quite what you need, go and ask it what you want. But here's a step-by-step guide and demonstration of that. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. So I'm going to assume a few things, that you are a subscriber, but also I'm going to assume that you have a project probably on GitHub, and you are going to use Gitpod. So you can actually deploy a Heroku app totally through Gitpod without having to do anything else. But if you have it on your desktop, then it works in the same way. Because this is Visual Studio Code, whether it's online or not. So what things have we got here? We have you're going to need to install the Heroku CLI, which I'll show you how to do. You're going to need to have a Heroku account, so go and sign up for one of those. First thing we've got to do, we've got to make sure that we've got all the Python packages we need installed in here, and we're going to create requirements.txt. So I'm going to write pip install flask unicorn, and I think that's going to install both the libraries that I need, because up here we've got SQLite 3 comes as standard, but Flask is an extra package that we need to install. And Gunicorn is an app that Heroku will use to run your server. We'll come on to that in a minute. Then we need to create requirements.txt. So we write pip freeze arrow requirements.txt. What this will do, we'll create a text file, requirements.txt text file, with a list of all the libraries that we need to make this app work. So when Heroku builds this, it will run through that and make sure that they're all installed, else it's not going to run, is it? And you should have something like that, depending on what your installed libraries are. And then we need to create a Procfile. A Procfile is the command, a bit like typing Python app.py, but we have to manually do that. Python app.py, we manually do that. But it's a command that the server has to run. So, and in this Procfile, we're going to put this bit of code. And the last bit, app, is really important. It must match the name of your app.py file. It's probably called app.py. Some people might have renamed it slightly, but it's basically where you start the Flask app from. So where you have this app equals Flask name, whatever, or like this bit of code to run the main function. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to create a proc. I'm going to go to the files. I'm going to create down here. I'm going to create a Procfile, capital P, really important. And then in here, I'm going to paste that. I'm going to save it. And that's all you need to do. Make sure you've got a capital P. If you don't already have a gitignore, add a gitignore to your repository so that you're not committing keys or secrets or anything like that. I already should have one somewhere. Strange, you can't see that. .gitignore. This is how you create it. And then in here, I've given you an example gitignore, but the main thing is that you're not committing the .m file. So let's just copy that. See here, this .m file. because that is the one that's going to contain all your secret keys, and it's one you don't want to push onto GitHub. So paste that in there. But obviously, if you've already created a Git repository, you probably already have one of these. The next thing we need to do is, if it's not a Git repository already, you need to git init. If it is, which it is, I'm just going to git add dot and then git commit -m, and I'm going to say added files for Heroku. And then I need to git push that. So it's going to push it up to my repository, and I'll have saved all my changes in that Flask repository on GitHub. Finally, we're going to get onto actually creating the app so it runs on the web. We're going to need to install the CLI for Heroku. Now, if you're running on your desktop, you only need to do this once, but unfortunately, if you're running through GitHub, Gitpod, you need to do it every time because it forgets. It just resets itself every time you open it up. So if I run that command, it will install everything that we need to get Heroku running. And then I'm going to do a Heroku login. Now this is where you need your Heroku account, because it's going to authenticate on the web. I press return, goes to here, I press login, it says I've authenticated you, you close that down, you go back to here, and then now we can actually finally get onto creating the app. So to do that, we need to use the command Heroku create. Heroku create, and I'm going to create an app, and it's going to be called a Heroku login test. Heroku deploy test, something like that, whatever you want, but because this is just an example. So that is now going to go to my Heroku account that I've authenticated with, and it is going to log in and create. It's already logged in, sorry, and it's going to create a Heroku account here. So if I go back to my list of apps, or you can see that it should, if I refresh that page, it should have an app named after that, Heroku deploy test. There we go. So the next thing you need to do is we're going to actually just push our entire app. We're going to deploy to Heroku. Now, depending on what your branch is called, sometimes it's called master, sometimes it's called main. You need to use one of these commands. I think you need to use git push Heroku main, and that will push our main branch to Heroku and deploy the app on there. So it's taking all this code, it's now pushing it up to this new app that we've created on Heroku, and it's going to run the app and deploy it. You should see some activity like here. It says there's a build in progress. That's because we pushed it. It usually takes a few seconds depending on how many things it's got to install and run. And then once it's successful, you'll see a success there, but you should get a message here. So any second now, it's going to go from build in progress to deployed. And if you click on that link there, it says view build progress. It will actually take you to a terminal where it will show you all the things that it's doing. You can see here it's installing all those libraries that we had to put in our requirements.txt. And finally, we need to set the Dynos. So yeah, finally, look, we've got deployed to Heroku. Now, if I click on Open App, I can test that it's actually running. So now my code that was originally just in the GitHub repository is now deployed on Heroku, and it will run like a normal website with a SQL backend and everything. But one of the things you need to be aware of is it does cost some money. So you can get, for $5 a month, you can get Eco Dynos, depending on what you want it to do. So, like if you want your app to, like, run on, have thousands and thousands of users, then you need to scale your dynos, it's like server time basically, up to a higher level. And at the moment you can see that it says it has no dynos. So we might not need to do this. because it seems to work anyway. But I think you should have to install something, but I put some instructions here anyway. So if you write this, it will deploy it to using Dynos, which is like a very low cost version. It costs like £5 a month, and you share 1,000 hours between all your repositories. So for like development and testing purposes, it's fine. But that really depends on what you want your application to do. So there you go. I've now set it up to run on that. And if you look in deploy, I think, or overview, it's now running on Dynos. So you need to have that if you want to have a lot of people logging in, but you want to keep your costs low. So it's and that's about it really. If you want to see any of the errors that come from the terminal when you're deploying, you can write Heroku logs tail in here, and it will show you any feedback. You can also just go to the logs here, and you can see stuff there. So yeah, thanks for that. If you like this video, like and subscribe.